So welcome everybody, or nice to virtually meet you. Thanks for joining. Yeah, this is really interesting times. You know, we're all sitting in our homes, or certainly if you're based in South Africa, and I'm sure most other countries, we're all in some form of lockdown or restricted behavior. So it's really interesting to think, you know, where do we find ourselves? You know, so the talk today, the idea is that you remove yourself now for the next hour or 50 minutes that we've got left from your desk, so to speak, from your work. Try and leave your work and your to-do list and whatever you have to do for the rest of the day, leave it somewhere else. This time is all about yourself. You know, there's amazing research done on you know, in the business world with people in business, and so many people spend so much time doing the work, but they don't actually spend a lot of time doing the work on themselves. So this time that we have now is for you. And I'm in no position to tell you what to do. I mean, that'll be arrogant. I can't tell you what to do. But I can share with you some things that I've picked up along the way. So as Kobus said, you know, I spent my life in advertising, and after that, went into some very alternative external journeys, Nepal and India in particular. And I quite resonate with the name of my business, Streetschool, is to learn from the streets, so to speak, learn in action, learn practically. Because some of these philosophical things, you listen to a chat and it's all rah, 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 and you know, you feel all good after that, but then things get back to normal. And then it doesn't stick, it doesn't work. So what we're hoping with this, so today we're going to look to almost 2,500 years back in what we can learn from the people in the ancient communities. In subsequent talks, we're going to look to Japan. We're going to discuss a concept called ikigai, which is the Japanese idea of a life of happiness and meaning. Then in later sessions, we're going to talk about a philosophy that got people through the concentration camps in the Second World War. You know, so how to discover meaning and purpose despite sitting in a concentration camp where people are dying all around you. So that's sort of the broad theme as Kobus also outlined. So, okay, let's get into today. So here we are, we're in COVID-19. It's unprecedented for all of us, but for humanity, this is not new. In 165 AD, so roughly 2,000 years ago, a pandemic broke out in Europe that killed almost a quarter of the population. We've heard about 1918, the Spanish flu that killed 50 million people. 10 years later, in 1929, was the Great Depression that caused even more trauma for people. So yet some people got through it. So this pandemic that we're in is not new for humanity, but it's new for us. But how did those people get through it? Some people got through it. They made sense of it. Some people perished. Some people stayed stagnant and just coped. And as humans, we're very good at coping. That is our nemesis. We can cope very well. But how do we grow and thrive in a situation like this? Because some people did. So we're going to sort of look at, and these are not my teachings. I didn't dream this up. You know, it's not like I'm being clever and telling you what to do, what I thought of. I didn't think of these things. I came across it in my travels and in my studies and so forth. And the Stoics are particularly interesting. They lived sort of, like I said, they started 2,300 years ago. So we're going to have a look at them, and in particular, a guy called Marcus Aurelius. So Marcus is broadly referred to as the greatest CEO that ever lived. He was a philosopher, he was a king, he was an emperor, and he lived a life and set an example that is sort of, it defies what we are taught about corruption and power. You know, the saying, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Marcus proved that wrong. He was not like that. You know, so we're going to look at his life and just see what we can learn from him. I just want to bring up a slide to show you what the world looked like then. So just give me a second here. Let me just get, where's my screen share? All right, you can see that on your screens hopefully now. So the world then consisted basically of China and Europe. You know, there was some penetration into Africa, a little bit in the Central American countries. the Mayans and so forth, but mostly the world was centered around Europe. And the British, the Roman Empire, you know, stretched from what we know now as the Middle East all the way to Britain, all across Europe, Italy, Spain, all across Europe to Britain. I mean, the emperor, when Marcus was a young boy, was called Hadrian. And Hadrian was the guy from Hadrian's Wall that is in Britain. And it stretched all the way northern Africa. So the Roman Empire was a vast country and community. And what we're studying is their philosophy and Marcus in particular. So just imagine, picture the scene. It's a time where men wore dresses and fought with live animals for sport. And killed each other, and some people lived in insane royalty, parties, sex, stuff happening, and some people lived hand to mouth in caves. And here's this guy, Marcus Aurelius, who became the emperor, and he had unlimited power. Unlimited, meaning he could, if he wanted all the gold in the world, he could collect it and they could pile it up somewhere in some Colosseum area for him. He ruled the world, but yet he didn't succumb to this. The temptations, can you imagine the temptations to be able to do anything you like, anything, and have anything you like, and not succumb to that? So this is the guy we're going to learn from. But now, before we get too deep into Marcus, I need to just go back a couple of steps and to introduce the guy who actually started all of this. His name was Zeno. So Zeno came from a little village that is now in Cyprus. It's in Cyprus. So he came from a little village in Cyprus, and he was a sailor. And one day on a sailing journey, he got stranded, and his ship sort of sprung a leak, and he got stuck on an island. And he was on this island for probably, they say, about a year. Before, there was no communication. Okay, you can't communicate. So he was stuck on this island, and he got eventually to Athens in Greece, penniless. He had nothing. He lost everything, and nobody knew him. So he arrived not owning anything. Nobody knows who he is, nothing to go on to. So he had to restart his life. And one day, the story goes, he goes into a bookstore, and he picked up, he could read, and paper had been invented by then, discovered by then, invented by then. And he walked into a bookstore, and he picked up a book that, I just want to admit somebody here. He walked into a bookstore, and he picked up this book that sort of spoke about a different way of living. Because now you must remember this, and during this time, you were told how to live. Free thought and free thinking was not really available. I mean, Socrates, who lived even earlier than Zeno, was basically killed because he told people to think. He said, don't believe everything you hear, you must think for yourself, figure it out. So Zeno got involved in this philosophy, and he loved it so much that he spent the rest of his life actually studying this, and he opened a school. And Greece at the time was the place where intellectual thought was happening. That's where people sort of practiced thinking about the human condition. So Zeno later was made an honorary citizen of Greece. I mean, it's an amazing. I mean, his quotes were so cool. He would say things like, "Well-being is realized in small steps, which in itself is not a small thing." Now, this sort of hints to the way they look at it, and we're going to unpack their philosophy in more detail a bit later. But they would sit on the verandas of the buildings, which is called stoas. So that's why the word stoa or stoic comes from. So stoic actually comes from the guys who sat on the stoop and the verandas and discussed, how to have a good life, because that's sort of just the origin of it. Another person that just bear mention here is a guy called Seneca. Now Seneca, some of you may have heard of Seneca. He was so powerful that when he called in his personal loan to the colony, the Roman colony in the British, in Britain. Britain was a colony of the Roman Empire at the time. When he called in his loan to the colony in Britain, the economy collapsed. I mean, that is how powerful these people were. But they practiced this way of behaving and way of doing things that is actually quite cool. Another guy that I just want to mention before we get to Marcus is Epictetus. So Epictetus, I just want to maybe let me just put a slide up, and then you can see what his name is. Let me just do a screen share here, then you can see what his name looks like. Just a second, there we go. So there was Zeno. So, I mean, look at the humor. There's a reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We need to listen a little bit more than we talk. You know, so in their philosophy, there's some really cool underlying pearls of wisdom that we mustn't take for granted. I just want to get to Epictetus. So that's how you can say that. That's how you spell his name. So what is interesting about Epictetus is he was a slave, and he was a slave for 30 years. But he was such a cool guy, and he was such a clever guy that his owners at the time began to give him some work to do in the field of teaching, because he taught himself how to read and write, and he began to be a teacher. And later he was granted his freedom, and you know, because of his studies, carried on and became one of the great Stoic proponents and teachers of all time. I just want to mention, the reason I'm mentioning him is that imagine somebody being born into slavery, come out of slavery, and then go on to become a teacher of this philosophy that people 2,000 years later, which is now, are still talking about. So there were some very special people. So, okay, now let's get to Marcus. The story goes that he was, you know, from a young boy, he didn't want to become he was born into a wealthy family, but he didn't want to pursue the road of the wealthy and go into the politics and the ruling class and so on. He wanted to be a simple guy. He wanted to practice his philosophy and live a simple life. But he was clearly destined for other things. I mean, the story is that his mother once caught him, early days, sleeping on the cold floors, and it's like, why would you do that? Why would you sleep on a cold floor and not in the bed? And he said, no, I want to harden myself. I want to toughen myself, because I know that life is hard and life is tough, but I want to get used to this, and I want to train my body how to deal with hardships. You know, so he had a very different attitude from the age of really, really young. His father died when he was about 3, so he got brought up by his grandfather and his mother. So they brought him up. He got married when he was about 18. His wife was called Faustina. So he and Faustina had 13 children, of which only 6 survived. You know, 4 daughters and 2 boys, you know, survived. So, you know, sorry, I'm just admitting some people as we talk here. So from a personal point, he knew what it was like to have personal loss. You know, sometimes when we think of these historians and people that lived a long time ago, we think, yeah, but it's just a name on some history thing. It's boring. But we forget that these were people with real lives that really lived, that had, you know, they were married, they had children, the children died, they'd suffered all these hardships. So, you know, one of his unique ways, and later in the talk, we're going to come to tools, like how can I apply this in my own life? He would write in diaries every day. Later, I mean, he wrote it to himself, and it is called the Meditations. It consists of 14 volumes. He didn't intend this to be published. He wrote it to himself as his daily routine of how to deal with what's in front of him. And this became its world fame. I mean, if you Google meditations, you will see what sits behind that. Okay, just in terms of the timeline. So Hadrian, I remember he was very ill in the later part of his life, and he died. And Marcus's uncle became emperor, and then when he died, Marcus became emperor. But now Marcus had a brother-in-law, a half-brother. So because he didn't want to really rule, he was not interested in this. He said to his half-brother, come, I don't want this thing really, you must share this with me. And the two of them sort of started ruling this, and it was the first time where the empire was ruled by 2 people. So they sort of did it together, but the people didn't really, Lucius was the name of his half-brother. Lucius wasn't really that popular. People really loved Marcus, I mean, because you know, he obviously has built up a reputation for himself. So let me just find myself here. So, okay, the wars. So his his reign was really typified by, he had a lot of war from externally, so they were attacked from the east constantly, they were attacked from the north constantly. He had civil unrest because later Lucius and some of the generals, there was a bit of a plot going, and even Marcus's wife got involved. So he had a lot of stuff happening, and he had a really tough, difficult time. And then the pandemic, and we're going to get to this. So let's get to this plague. So imagine this: there's this plague. It started. Marcus he became the emperor in 161. So 4 years later, this plague came in, and the soldiers, interestingly, brought it from the east. It came from, they think it sort of also came from Chinese side, but it's speculation. And this plague, they couldn't identify it, and it brought the Roman Empire to its knees. It is regarded as the turning point. And Marcus is seen as the last of the 5 good emperors. And the Antonine, it's called the Antonine Plague, it was named after him, brought this empire to its knees. It killed thousands of people, or not thousands, per day, millions. It is estimated around 5 million people, roughly a quarter of the population. But these stats, I wouldn't know. This is what the information that's available to us. But this was a turning point. But throughout all of this, Marcus remained steadfast. He didn't waver throughout his reign. And taking you back to where we started, a guy that got unlimited power. How did he do it? And we're gonna get to that in a minute. Marcus died when in 180. So he ruled the empire for almost 20 years. And this pandemic carried on it came up again, and was another 15 years. There was this pandemic. So crazy times. I mean, back to today. Today is crazy for us, but it's not crazy for mankind. Okay, so let's get into this philosophy in detail. And when I just want to pause here for a second. As you listen to this, I don't know what goes on in your life, and I don't know where you are, but there is something about this time that points towards the real area where we need to pay attention. Most of us live in the external world. We engage with life, we go to work, we engage with the people around us, and that's where we live. But what this philosophy is telling us is there are times, and at times of crisis, even more so, to go internally and look at how am I inside? Because only when I am strong inside will I be able to deal with what is outside. Let's take this as an example. Most of you guys here on this chat is in the advertising business. So you write a great piece of copy, you do a great strategy, you've got a great campaign line, you put it out, the client loves it, and you feel hot. You feel I'm there, I've done my thing. You can walk on, you're in the clouds. The next day you do the same, they reject it, nobody likes it, and you feel bad. You feel like bottom of the ocean. What has changed? Somebody liked your stuff the one day, somebody didn't like it the other day, yet you feel very different. Your control sits on the outside. Now, it's easy for me to tell you these things, but I mean, that's the reality. We are governed by things that happen outside, because we are never taught, and we never told how to cultivate an internal world so that whatever happens externally, you can be okay. So in a way, this philosophy is very, very much that. I mean, when Marcus died, he is, as the saying goes, he said something, like, don't worry about me. Think about what is happening out there and go and care for the people and go and work there. I'm okay. Don't worry too much about me. So very unselfish guy. So to sum up their philosophy, and I'm just going to bring up another slide here just for you to, so it's easy. Sorry, the guys who can't see the slides, I'll describe it to you as we talk through it. So one of the founding, what is called the 3 founding principles is, there's a scene of that is typically of the plague that was during the time. So the principle is built on 3 things: that virtue is the highest good. Now, virtue in this context, and I'll unpack virtue as we go along, but virtue in this context is like a hammer is supposed to hit a nail. That's what makes it a good hammer. It doesn't break, and it's strong enough, and it can hit a nail. So in this context, virtue is that as a human being, we need to be good as a human being. The Stoics would tell us that in life, we are first human beings. Then we are from, in their case, from Rome. Then I am married and I've got kids and I live in this city. The biggest principle is that you are a human, and you must live according to what is right as a human. Where you come from and which country you live in and what you do, those things are secondary. That's not really what is important. So that's the first principle. The second one that they tell us is follow nature, meaning learn see what is going on around you and follow nature in the sense of things come and go, things change, nothing lasts forever, things are connected, things in life, nature relies on each other. So there's a lot of, and we don't have the time to go in the subsequent workshop sessions that we're going to do after this. We'll go into more detail, but in broad terms, they would tell us that look at nature, respect where you are, and then follow that. And then the third one that's really, really useful quickly is what is called dichotomy of control. It means in each of us, in our lives, there are stuff we can control, and there's stuff we can't control. And the Stoics will say to us, don't worry about the stuff you can't control. What's the use of controlling stuff that you can't control? I mean, it's like, you're just going to worry about it. There's nothing you can do about it. Control what you can. And what you can control is attitude, your character. You can go and do what is, like imagine a spiritual bucket list where you cultivate not going on a fancy trip or visiting a country, but cultivating your own moral standards or your own principles, and your own sense of patience, for instance. So this dichotomy of control what is outside and don't worry too much about, don't control what's outside and control inside is an important principle. Let me just see, I've got yeah. Okay, now in terms of the four virtues, so there's four that's really important in their way of thinking. The first one is called practical wisdom. And this basically means that you must be sussed to know how to handle things. You must be wise, and you must have a perspective of life or the situation and a context so that you are able to do the right thing. So wisdom wisdom doesn't mean clever. Somebody can invent an atomic bomb that kills millions of people. That person is very, very clever, very clever. But that person isn't necessarily wise. So wisdom, we must not look at wisdom as just being clever. Wisdom is also knowing how to do the right thing in a particular situation. The second thing is courage. And courage not only to do what is right, but also to say what is right and to stand up when somebody needs to stand up. The third principle is justice. You must know what is right and wrong. And just a caveat here. Justice not for me, not selfish justice. Most of us go through life thinking, I want things my way. And I will be happy if things is my way. I mean, it's human. I want this, I want my opinion, I want more this, less of that. I want to go there, why don't you agree with me? Why don't they like this about, it's like me. But there's a time that maybe we need to turn this around and appreciate that life is asking us something, and I need to do something right for the world bigger than just myself. I mean, that is justice. And all of these things are easy to talk about. It only becomes real when the rubber hits the road. When you are confronted with a decision where your sense of justice will come into play. Anyway, that's the third one. The fourth one is self-control, that you need to temper yourself. We have thoughts. We are not our thoughts. And we have emotions. We are not our emotions. And I'm deliberately putting it like that because sometimes we identify ourselves so much with our thoughts and our thinking that we think it's the same. But there is a power behind this. We have the ability to control what we say, what we think. It comes with practice, but it is possible. And the Stoics encourage us to practice self-control. So just finishing off on this section, the key disciplines to live by will be, you must control your will, related to what I've said just now. What you want and what you don't want, if you really think about it with logic, not with emotions, there's a difference. If you unpack your will, what you want and what you don't want with logic, there may be a different awareness that stands up in you. The third one is positive action. And there's two things here. You need to take action. We can't wait for things to happen. We can't wait for somebody to, sometimes we have to wait, but the emphasis is on you need to take action. You, nobody else. I mean, nobody else is going to actually do it for you. So that they remind us of that. And it obviously has got to be positive action. And this thing about awareness, sometimes it's referred to as mindfulness, but this awareness, to be aware of what is going on around you, is really, one of their key principles. Okay, so let's move on. So I just want to get out of this. We're now going to come to, so another pace change here in the talk. We've now unpacked their philosophy a little bit, but let's see how it plays out. So let's see how, if now it's all good and me telling you this. Sorry, I've just got to unmute that. There's a person here. I just want to mute somebody, or just if you unmuted, just mute yourself. So in terms of how does it play out in our normal life? I just want to mute this. Sorry. I'm going to remove. Fix this. Guys, just check that you're muted. Find this person who's not muted. All right, let me carry on anyway.
Jane, you're on speaker. Please, can you mute yourself, Jane?
Right. So, got it. No problem. Okay. Sorry, guys. Here we go then. All right. So, what if I say, okay, I'm not good enough? So we all have feelings like this. So I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. So what the Stoics will tell us is deal with what you got. You got dealt a hand of cards. You got dealt a certain situation or a certain certain position with certain abilities. You must go to your talents. Go and look what you already have. No situation is so bad that you cannot make it worse. So they will encourage us to go inside and look at what you have and take that it's like a toolbox, So I only have this, and this is what I'm going to work with. To wish for things that you don't have is exactly that. It's wishful thinking, and it's not going to lead you, into any place of well-being. I can't do this on my own. It's another thing. It's like, what if I can't do this on my own? I mean, the strongest people have the most trouble asking for help. It takes a lot of courage to ask for help. And we're not always very good at it. We want to do it our own. We think it's a sign of weakness, and it's like blah, blah, blah. Asking for help may be the best thing that we can do for ourselves and for the people around us. But we want to be the hero, and we want to show it. We selfishly want to go through, and we want to do our thing. But that is the wrong way of looking at this. If you can't do it. Nobody can do anything on their own. Anything and everybody has asked for help somewhere along the line. What do I think? It's too difficult. It's too hard. So in your life, you've heard it all. The budgets are small. There's not enough time. We've run out of ideas. The suppliers are late. nobody's without challenges. The Stoics had challenges. I mean, imagine Marcus with having to keep an empire together, all this, wars being fought, the pandemic, the Tiber, the river in Rome flooded, and there were famine in the city in his first year. I mean, he could have said, this is too difficult. And he had an out. He could have said, you know what? I don't want this anymore. I want to go and live in a cave somewhere and, do my thing. He didn't do that. The interesting thing here is about Marcus and being difficult. He didn't want to disappoint himself. He would say that I did these things not because for the people, I did it because it was the right thing to do. Just think about that. Somebody doing something because it's the right thing to do. Not because they want to be a hero and want to be famous and, want to impress other people. So back to, if it's too difficult, they would tell us, just do your best. Don't worry about it. Just do your best. You don't have to, everybody's got limitations. If I feel overwhelmed, what do I do if it's just too much? I just feel overwhelmed. Now here, interestingly, most of us live in one of, well, not most of us, we all live in one of three domains. We live in the future, where worry sits. We live in the past, where regret sits. Or we live, in the moment. Now, you for yourself, I can't speak for you, but I know that I don't live here in this moment the whole time. It's very difficult, but it is possible to live more time being aware of what is happening now around me and what I'm dealing with right here, and not to sit and but sit and have regrets about the past and worry unnecessarily about the future that hasn't happened yet. One of these Stoics, Seneca, is quoted in saying that most of the things we worry about never happens. It never happens. And I mean, it'll be interesting if you for yourself can make a little checklist to see what do you worry about and what actually happens. Because I mean, that's the truest way of changing your behavior, is to see that most of the things I worry about doesn't actually materialize. So if you feel overwhelmed, the Stoics will tell us, come to the moment, deal with what is in front of you and do your best. Don't think too much about the other two domains that we live in. Marcus would say, don't let your imagination be crushed by life as a whole. Don't let your imagination be crushed by life as a whole. Just make it smaller. And, they would say, so if you think it's overwhelmed, it's unbearable, say, okay, so why is it so unbearable? Ask yourself, why can't I get through this? Why can't I endure this? And if you really, really, really look deep inside yourself of why you cannot deal with this situation, in my case, I'm embarrassed because the reasons are small and they're petty and they're selfish, and it's actually rubbish. So another question. So say we would say, okay, so but will things ever get better? If we would ask Marcus, so it's rough at the moment, will we ever get better? He will say, look, I don't know. You'll probably say he doesn't, because he doesn't know. He can't foresee what happens in the future. But he would say, keep calm and stay in control of yourself and just carry on. I mean, we can look at any athlete. It's a nice example to use. Any athlete, if you look at the success, somewhere along the line, they kept going. They didn't give up. Things were bad. They were down in the doldrums, but they carried on. They carried on. So if I feel alone, often we feel alone. This is an interesting one. Often, we live in societies with other people, but we feel alone sometimes. So imagine this. So you, there where you sit, are part of a family. You had a father, you had a mother. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. You may have siblings, you have family members, but you are part of your own lineage. So you are a lineage. There were people that preceded you. So you stand sort of the last in line. I mean, if you're a parent and you've got children, then okay, who's really the last in line? But like I've got kids, so they may be the last in line alive from our lineage as a family, but I'm sort of father, so maybe don't have a position of seniority, but you know what I mean. So I stand last in line of my own lineage. So I have to carry the torch. It is not an option. I may feel alone. Okay, it's fine. And this, what I'm now telling you, is not necessarily going to take away the loneliness, but like darkness cannot be carried out of a room. And you can't carry darkness out of a room. You put the light on and the darkness goes away. So loneliness cannot be replaced with, let someone come and, you know, sit next to me and now I'm not going to feel lonely anymore. No, 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 no. That's not going to work. It's not going to last. You need to change your attitude. Because if you change your attitude, all the other things will fall into place. It's like success. You know, you can't chase success for its own sake. It's not going to happen. You need to do something and then you will be successful. So in the case of feeling alone, if you realize that you have to carry the torch for the people who came before you, it will fill you with a sense of responsibility. And, you know, in your own way, play with this in your own mind. You may be proud. You know, some attitudinal values will start to germinate inside of you to say, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to carry on regardless of feeling alone. Like say, we're sitting here in the pandemic. This is the last one. So what is the biggest question you can ask yourself now? You know, we're going to get through this. You know, I don't know, but the sun may come up tomorrow. So I'm believing sun's going to come up. And in a couple of weeks or months or whatever, we're going to get through this. And we're going to look back at this time. And what is the story that you're going to tell yourself? Because you can tell yourself, okay, I watched so much TV, you know, I did this, you know, I was bored of this. And it could be a story of boredom and waiting to get through this. Or it could be a story of, I've learned this, I've done this, you know, it could be a story of growth. Now, I can't tell you what to do, and we're now going to get to, we've got 10 minutes left in our session. We're now going to get back to, we're going to get to tools now. But this question, what would I like to tell myself when this lockdown is over? Ask yourself that and sit with that question. I don't know what the answer is, but the Stoics would encourage us to make it count. To not waste this time, because if you waste this time, you are selling yourself cheaply. I mean, you as a person, the most valuable thing you have as a commodity is time. I mean, money you can get back. You lose money, you can get it back. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but you can get it back. The most valuable resource you have is time. And if you spend your time, sell your time by doing nothing, you are selling yourself cheaply, and you deserve better than that. All right, so let's get some tools. We've got a couple of minutes left. So if I now want to become, and guys, you can go and Google. There are many platforms in the document. We're going to distribute afterwards. There's many places where you can watch, you know, YouTube clips. It's a very cool philosophy to deal with. It's very practical. It's really, really useful. So let's just touch quickly on a couple of tools that they use. So the first one is maybe going to come as a shock to you, but it's called negative visualization. So think about the worst things that can happen. Not because you want those things to happen, but to emotionally steel yourself for those things happening. We are already doing it. We take out insurance on our houses. We take out insurance on our cars. We put locks on our doors. Why? Because nobody must break in case my car gets bumped. So we already practice this. But Marcus would say to us, in the morning, when you wake up, think that today I'm going to get resistance. People are not going to like what I have to say. People are not going to agree with what's happening. I may be late for a meeting because of some unforeseen circumstances and people are going to be disappointed, blah, blah, blah. So go prepare yourself. And the purpose of this is to prepare yourself so that when you are late, or not late, but when, say, somebody disagree with you or you get resistance from people, that you can sort of internally be prepared for this. It's not out of the blue. You're not blindly walked into this disappointing moment. You've steeled yourself. You've readied yourself. So this negative visualization is a really cool tool, and just see how it plays out in personal relationships. So we often take people for granted. You know, we take our partners. I'm speaking for myself, but you know, if I take my wife for granted, me imagining that she's not with me anymore, will completely change my attitude to her. Not that I've got a bad attitude towards her, but if I wake up in the morning having thought, you know, here she is, she didn't die, she's alive today, you know. So negative visualization, we can use it in our personal relationship capacities to just make us appreciate the beauty and the strength around us. The second one I quickly want to touch on is called self-control. So as you go through your day, practice self-control, meaning if somebody tells you something that you don't agree with, just pause. Just before you launch into a retaliation, before as your emotions come, and this is possible. It's not, again, I'm repeating myself, it's not easy, but it takes practice, but it's possible. As that emotion of anger comes, just see it and just hold it. Just hold it and try and control it a little bit, and then you do what you have to do. But somewhere, the easy way to control to practice self-control is little things like say what you eat. So I'm not telling you must go on a diet, but say like me, for instance, I'm dying for a cup of coffee and say, I'm going to wait an hour. And it's not because the coffee is not good for me. It's not, or chocolate, whatever. I'm not delaying it because of health, physical health. I'm delaying it for the reasons of mental health, so that I practice, because the mind is like a muscle. We don't think of it this way. The mind it's like a muscle. So if you can practice your mind, you will get stronger and stronger and stronger. None of us will pitch up for a road race, for a marathon, if we haven't trained. It's insane. Why would you do that? So how do you think you can control your mind if you haven't practiced, you know? So little things. So practice being in control little by little by little. And as you baby steps, you get stronger. Another one that is quite cool is, you know, there's this, Marcus has got this saying that we love ourselves more than anybody else, but we worry more about other people's opinion than our own. I mean, just think of that. Just think how silly. I'm speaking for myself here. Then if I speak for myself, I can call it stupid. So how stupid is that? That because when you say love yourself, you know, if I have to, I mean, if I've got a thing, if my arm is cut off, then I'm worried about me, you know. So at the basis of this, of us being human, is this thing that we all regard ourselves as actually the most important thing on this earth, you know, if you really think about it. So if that is the one premise, but yet we are so susceptible to what other people think of us and say of us. I mean, how bizarre is that? So in order to correct this, the Stoics will say, do silly things. So like yesterday, I went to the shop. We can go to the shop. So I went to the shops, and I had a pair of shorts on and very like silly socks with my shoes. So I looked, I was embarrassed going to the shops like that. And they will say that is a little example of what you can do to be silly in public, so that you cultivate this feeling of I don't give a damn, really. And I'm not saying that they're not telling us to be obnoxious and to be rude and to be ugly and to be a bad person. No, they're telling us to do silly things to cultivate this attitude that what other people think of me is not really important. What I think of me is important. And this I that they refer to here is not a selfish me, but a case of a Marcus who had all the power in the world. All the power, he could have anything he wanted. But he stayed in his job and he did the things the right way because it is the right thing to do, not to impress other people. So that's what they're referring to here. The next one is maybe a bit soft. It's journaling. So, you know, so often we think journaling is for, you know, it's for, like in my case, I'm a guy, so I think that's for girls. And it's not. There's compelling research that suggests that journaling has got the therapeutic powers of journaling is underestimated. Let me just say that. And in the case of the Stoics, they would journal in the evening, writing down how was today, what happened, what was useful, what was not useful, what can I do differently, what can I learn from it. So it was like an active meditation. So like you know, when you meditate, so that was like, the guys from the East will call it analytical meditation. So you would you would be in a meditative moment, reflecting on your day and yourself, capturing your thinking, and then making promises of how it's going to be better tomorrow. So it's a little practice, but you need to do it every day. You can't just do it once and think it's going to work for you. These things, it's like, remember what Zeno said about small things, doing small things every day. And that is no small thing. It's little by little. It's the little drop that fills the bucket. Aligned to this journaling thing is the two very important bookends of your day. Most of us, when we wake up, I'm gonna put it out there that most of us do one of two things. We grab the phone or we make a cup of coffee. So if you're like me, I go and make myself a cup of tea, but I try not to. The two important bookends that we need to do every day is you can get up, or you can lie in bed, or you can get up and go and sit somewhere, but prepare yourself for the day. Think, how am I going to do this day? How do I want it to play out? How am I going to behave? What kind of person do I want to be? What do I want person to think of me if I go through this day? You can go to your to-do list. It's not really your to-do list moment. It's more me in this life. How am I going to present myself? And then, but Kobus, in the later workshops, we'll get into more detail with that. Oh, we're coming to the end. I'm going to end with this one. And in the evening, close up that bookend and finish your day. And if you can, the Stoics will tell us that like an artist has got a canvas to paint on, we have our life to paint our life on, and a good philosophy is the paintbrushes for our life. So, but I think Kobus, is our time is up. We're gonna stop it here.
Yeah, unfortunately the time is up. I'm sure there must be some questions, but also some people might need to leave for other meetings. So before those people leave, I just want to say thank you for joining us for this first session. If you have to go now, it's been great to have you on board for that, and thank you, Klasie, for the lecture. If you have any suggestions as to how we can make small changes to this from a tech point of view or delivery, anything like that, please feel free to email me. And then please look out for next week's lecture, which will be on a vastly different topic by Dr. Carla Ensland from Vega School of Brand Communication on the immediate impact of COVID-19 on brands worldwide. So I think that would be also very interesting for a variety of different reasons. So if you need to leave now, that brings us to the end of the formal discussion. But if there's anyone, I suppose, who has a question, I've got a question or two. But maybe we throw it open to the floor for those who can stay, and we can maybe discuss it a little bit. I can go first. Well, I don't know, maybe people are muted. So, but let me go first. So, Klasie, I suppose the difficult thing to get right is we all have a very compelling reason at this point in time to learn about this kind of thing and to do this to improve our own mental health, But I suppose the question I have is, when things get better again and things, start to improve, how do you stay on this path, and and not just go back to grabbing your phone as a first thing that you do in the morning, and not being mindful of the things we discussed.
Yeah. Kobus, two comments. Sometimes these people put things in a simple term, and that captures a lot of teachings. But it's while the going is good, it is easy to lapse into, like you say, into different kind of behavior. But the thing that comes out of this, and also what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks' time, is practice. We need to have discipline and practice. And I'm struggling to answer this thing, but a person needs to make a decision that, am I going to be the architect of my life as much as I possibly can? And if the answer is yes, then you need to take responsibility and go and do things. So you need to cultivate an attitude. It's an intent. So if your intent is to be the best person. And remember when I spoke about the Stoics, they spoke about you firstly a human being, and then you drill down, and then eventually you become a father living in some city somewhere, or a wife, or whatever. But if you have the right intent to be the best person you can be, then you're going to have to practice certain things. So in a strange way now, it's actually an interesting question. In a strange way now, it is difficult to cope because I'm speaking generally, we don't have the mental robustness, but in future, it gets so easy that we can go and, in a manner of speaking, lie on the couch and chill a little bit. But that is, yeah, so I think it comes down to the individual and what you want. I mean, if you want to go through life not being an architect of your own life, then drift, go for it. But if you want to be the architect, it comes down to you personally got to take responsibility for it.
And the reward, I suppose, is more meaning, just a more meaningful life.
Yeah. And this thing about meaning, it's not stuff that happens there in isolation, sitting in some mountain village, some mountain hut, all being serene. My meaning is at work. And in the later sessions, we're going to get there. To have a meaningful life includes your work, how you express yourself in your work. And this, the thing is, there's maybe this is a better answer to the first one. There's also another dichotomy. It's called the dichotomy of responsibility. So the more responsible you are, the easier things will become. Let's think of running. So if I have to train and run, so the more I run and train, the easier running is going to become. In the same way with this thing, the more I practice these things, the easier life is going to become. Life will never be completely easy without challenges. But the more I practice this, the easier. And if one can get used to that, okay, when I have my morning reflections, and I'm not talking about prayer here. This is not prayer. Prayer is something else. And we'll deal with prayer. It's very important, but this is not what I'm talking about. But if I have my morning and my evening reflections, my life I will feel more in control, and then it starts to feed itself.
And just to tie back to the title of the talk, which is Leading Through a Pandemic, I suppose if you Marcus Aurelius, if it comes from the top, that level of awareness and meaning, that must have seeped into his lieutenants and into his. I mean, it must have been not just one person, like the head of a match that burns, but the entire body must have experienced this.
Absolutely.
Because whether it's an organization or whether it's us leading a small family, we're all leaders. In some way, we are leading something or someone through this. I think it's,
absolutely. Yeah, you touch on another interesting thing there. Role models. Each of us, every single one of us, is a role model. We are role models for ourselves also, but also for other people. So whether you're an emperor like him, and the people were devastated, and from then on the empire started to collapse. But each of us are a role model, and if you do the right thing for the right reasons, you set an example. You set a tone that other people start to follow. And it's a good thing. It's like it's good stuff. So it will create a groundswell. So absolutely that. And we often say it starts at the top. It does, but it can start anywhere.
Is there anyone on the forum that has a question for Klasie or a comment?
Yeah, I don't see any comments, questions here, Kobus. So maybe this is we sorted for the moment.
Yes, if there's anyone else who wants to ask something before we end the session, please feel free to do so now. Okay.
All right, I'm going to stop our recording.
Okay.